Hello, good evening and welcome to Bale UK's November webinar. Tonight, we'll be listening to Mike Penfold and his self-built home in West Wales. On the agenda is the Bale Building UK introduction, as presented by myself, Cyprian Edmonds. I'm the chairperson for Bale Building UK. I'll be introducing you to Mike Penfold, and then he will take hold of the reins and present to us his home. At the end of that, we will have a Q&A where you can ask your questions. So, who is Bale Building UK? Founded in 2015 as a collective of natural builders, the idea was to share expertise and promote straw building through education and demonstration projects across the UK. We have strong European connections through SBUK, the European Bale Building Association, and we're key partners in Upstraw project, which took place in 2017 to 2021. This delivered major outcomes, including the technical guide, the Straw EPD, and the Bale House, which is situated in Hastings National Park. Whilst leading on sustainability through practical innovation, we actively engage with government policy to influence change. We are presently developing solutions through dedicated working groups, which focus on key challenges in the sector. We have a growing membership base of practitioners, professionals, and enthusiasts working together to mainstream straw building in the UK. So please join us. So, who is Mike Penfold? Mike Penfold brings a unique perspective to natural building, combining his design studies background with hands-on experience. Trading urban life in Reading for the Welsh countryside in 2017, he's turned his lifelong passion for making and DIY into practical reality by successfully completing his own straw home. Listen tonight because Mike's journey from design theory to actual construction offers valuable insights for anyone interested in self-building with natural materials. There's a Q&A at the end of Mike's presentation, so feel free to ask questions in the chat. It is there where we will also insert links to further information. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over the session to Mike.
Hi there, I'm Mike, and I've been asked to talk about my experience building my straw bale home. Quite a nervous public speaker, so if I start gabbling, if someone could wave at me, and I'll try and slow down a little bit. All right. In 2017, my family and I moved into a caravan in a field on the edge of a village in West Wales. We found the field after a lot of searching on Zoopla. The pros were it had really good access, it was close to water and power, and it had excellent planning permission, which meant we could definitely build there as long as we could find a design that the council would approve of. It wasn't quite as isolated as we'd hoped, but yeah, this has got good and bad points. And as you can see from the pictures, it's quite a steep slope. Best of all, it had been on the market for years, and the seller accepted a cheeky offer of half the asking price. First hurdle was to change planning permission to something we wanted to build. Our experience was that the planners were not at all fazed by the alternative building method. Their only concern was it should be in keeping with the village. This is no mean feat in a village where all the surrounding houses are different styles. What it boiled down to was that the house had to be reasonably conventional in appearance, so not my original roundhouse design. As far as skills go, I was a reasonably competent DIYer, but I definitely never built a house before. I attended a 2-day workshop with Barbara Jones, which was extremely helpful, and I also happened to meet an amazing structural engineer there who worked out all of the structural aspects of the build. I also studied Barbara's book religiously and would recommend anyone should do the same. Everything else I learned by asking a lot of people a lot of questions and extensive use of YouTube. I did employ an electrician in the end because there are quite a lot of regulations, and it actually turned out nearly as expensive to get the DIY installation signed off by building control as it was going to be to do it myself. Pretty much everything else I did either by myself or with help from friends. If anyone doing this, expect planning permission and building regulations approval to take time, and you need to be very patient with the authorities, and you will not always find this easy. In our case, it took a year to have existing planning permission altered and to achieve building regs approval. Come next slide, please. Cool. The build. The house is a semi-structural straw bale house with an open plan ground floor and a chalet-style first floor with 3 bedrooms. It's actually based on a house my father-in-law built using conventional building methods about 30 years ago, although we've modified it significantly. The site was initially prepared by cutting a level platform out of the hillside and pouring concrete foundations. The initial plan had been to build out from the hillside, and the engineering had been designed with that in mind. The change to cutting a terrace was made in order to lower the overall height relative to the road. And if this had been the original plan, I'd probably have done the foundations differently. Next one, please. Cool. The base walls were built from concrete blocks and fixings were installed to tie down the wooden structure to the foundations. Okay, next one. Cool. Next stage was timber. The lower ring beam and suspended timber floor joists were integrated into one piece, as you can see on the left. And the posts were fitted for the doors and windows. These posts also serve a structural purpose. There are actually a couple concealed within the walls, which all help balance the roof loads. This enabled us to achieve quite large openings in the side that has the good view. Okay, next one, please. Right. After the scaffolding went up, the main ring beam was constructed in situ, about a foot above its final position. It's supported by some additional bars of scaffolding and arranged so it could slide down the vertical posts when it was finally lowered into place. Okay, next one, please. The straw bales were supplied by a local wholesaler who probably bought them in from England because there's not a lot of wheat grown in this area. The bales were stacked like bricks to build the wall, notching them into the posts and pinning with hazel stakes every few courses. This part took 2.5 weeks. The surprise when building a straw bale house is what a small part of the build the bale work actually is. Cool. And the next one, please. The beam was supported with then supported with acro props, so the scaffolding could be removed, and the ring beam was then very, very carefully lowered into place by just slowly lowering the props. The walls were then further compressed using ratchet straps, which also helps to level it out and make sure it's all perfectly level before moving on. And then the ring beam was secured into place by bolting to the vertical posts, as in the image in the bottom right. The excess was then trimmed off the post and the ring beam stuffed with insulation before capping it with OSB. That night was a huge storm. Thankfully, having compressed the wall, it was possible to tarp it quite well. Even so, we suffered a few areas of water damage which had to be repaired before plastering by stripping out the wet straw and packing it in with dry. Cool, next one, please. Next is the roof. The aim was to get the structure as watertight as quickly as possible and hopefully avoid any more floods. We used trusses and had them lifted into place with a crane. This was an essential move because the heaviest of the trusses are 3/4 of a ton each, and the crane enabled us to get them all in place in one day. Cool. Can I have the next one? Using the truss roof solved a lot of structural problems, and it made it possible to get the whole roof waterproof before the winter set in. The straw walls were protected while this was going on with using tarpaulin skirts until the roof was complete and it was warm enough again for lime plastering. Next one. The roof is slated with fibre cement slates, which is mainly to fit in with the neighbouring houses, but it also keeps the weight and cost down compared to a natural slate, which would have been totally outside the budget. Next one, please. Okay. The lime plastering was easily the biggest single part of the build. I used pre-mixed lime mortar from Timar, and I think it took approximately 17 tons to complete the walls inside and out. I decided to use lime inside, partly because I was familiar with the application process by that point, but also as I had several bags left after coating the outside. The only concern with doing this is it's very hard to control the rate of drying once you've got a sort of sealed building, which you do by that point. So it requires a lot of attention to making sure you keep it damp so it doesn't dry out too fast. After preparing the walls by trimming the straw to a flattish finish and filling the deeper hollows with a mix of straw and lime, the lime goes on in 3 stages. Next one, please. Cool. The base coat, which is massaged into the straw to provide a stable surface to work on. Once this has gone off a bit, you can apply the scratch coat, which went on in 2 layers, and this makes up the body of the render. Hessian cloth is embedded in this layer at places such as the corners, the windows, and anywhere else that needs a little extra strength. In my case, it was places where I'd had to do repairs from the water damage as well. We use gloved hands to apply this, which is a really nice, really pleasant tactile experience, and there's a lot of fun to do. The surface of that then gets scratched with a comb to provide a key for the next layer. The top coat provides a finer finish, and on the outside I used a metal plasterer's trowel to apply it. This was not a great idea. For an inexperienced plasterer, putting on lime with a metal trowel is a recipe for pain. My wrists hurt like hell for the entire 3 weeks it took me to get the top coat on. When we did the inside, I used gloved hands, and I enjoyed it much more. Okay, next one, please. Cool. Have fun with it. This is a really big job. And it's a great opportunity to put a little bit of you into the house. So have fun with this, play with the details, and take a bit of time to enjoy it. Okay, next one, please. This was the grand unwrapping day, where we finally got to take the skirts off. This is a few months off, obviously a few months after the render's been completed, and it's had time to sort of pretty much cure. Most of the rest of the build from here on differed little from standard modern building techniques. Mostly this involves things like fitting the interior walls and floors, insulating the roof and running services, and then finally you get the decorating and fitting the kitchen and the bathroom and so on. Next one, please. All the services, such as water and electrics, are run under the floors and within a few internal stud walls. Any sockets and switches which had to be in straw walls, you need to put ducting and mattresses into the wall before you do the plastering. Although these jobs aren't as big as the structure, they do add up. And on our build, took almost half the total build time. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yeah, we moved in at the end of 2020, 2.5 years after we broke ground, and we're very thankful to avoid another winter in the caravan. We're still adding little details like skirting boards from time to time, and we probably always will be. Cool. Next slide, please. Right, lessons learned. Generally, I found it straightforward to source materials, but don't forget the lead times when you're planning what you need for the next phase. Straw in particular can be harder to get in early summer, which is probably just when you're going to want it, because last year's stock's coming to an end. Make sure you plan ahead for it and find a good supplier. And remember, when you store, anytime you store it, you're going to have to be able to keep it dry while it's stored. Building a house is a really big project, but break it up into lots of little jobs and tackle them one at a time. Plan how they go together, but you don't need to learn how to do them until it's time to do it fully, until it's time to do them. Lime plastering is massive. It's easily the biggest job you'll have to deal with. Many hands really do make light work, but it is a lot of fun. So you should be able to find willing helpers. Next one, please. Cool. Benefits. Obviously, straw bales provide excellent insulation, as we already know that. It makes a house that requires minimal additional heating. It's also really good sound insulation. After being in a caravan with walls that wobbled in high winds for 3 years, it was almost too quiet when we first moved in. It's a great use of a waste, what is effectively a waste material. And because you can do it yourself, self-building can create huge savings in labor costs, probably half the cost of a normal building. Cool. Next one, please. There are a few downsides. You need to consider the prevailing weather carefully and provide some extra protection to exposed areas. On the right-hand side, there's a photo there of the veranda I eventually built after having to repair the end wall twice before realizing what was actually causing the problem. Also, as long as you can repair water damage to the walls, you really don't want to if you can avoid it. Everything else is heartbreaking. Plan carefully around your seasons and really consider how you're going to protect the walls and work out the quickest way of building your roof possible. Once they're plastered, the walls will be safe, but you do need, while they're open, it's worth thinking about protecting from vermin. They like a nice, warm, cozy home in winter. We've got 2 small bottle windows to remind us of this fact because we wound up with a foot-wide hole right through the wall. Next one. Cool. Obviously, there's a few small things I'd do differently. There are some little layout changes, and frankly, I'd like it to be off-grid. But the biggest change I'd make would be to site the house on gravel footings and piers instead of using concrete. But don't let eco-purism stand in your way. Sometimes concrete is the most appropriate option, and anything built from straw bales is going to be more sustainable than a normal building. Next one. Finally, most importantly, anyone can do this. You can build your own home. It's really satisfying, relatively affordable, and you're going to learn a whole bunch of new skills which will make you more independent and more self-reliant moving into the future. Cool. If you made it this far, thanks for listening to my ramble. I'll hand you back to Cyprian and there'll be a Q&A at the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. That was brilliant. That was very good. I really enjoyed that, and I hope everyone else on the call enjoyed it too. Let me go back. In fact, let me stop sharing the screen and let's go on to questions. I'm sure there are questions from people. They want to raise their hands or put questions in the chat. Please do. I'll tell you what I'm going to ask you, actually. I'm going to start off asking a question. Oh, actually, no. Mario Stoinov has a question.
Hello.
Hello, Mario.
I'm just wanted to ask how much isolation you put in the roof.
In the roof, in the sloping parts of the roof, there is 170 mil of rock wool, and then a little bit of Celotex. There's about 1 inch of Celotex on top of that.
Okay, and you have this air breathable roof like I see on the wooden frame.
Yeah,
Okay.
So it's I think it's technically called a warm roof. So you've got a gap between the felt and the tiles. Yeah, the battens are sort of lifted up.
And did you put some net because of the insects and stuff of that gap?
Not in that gap. No, there's not really enough space for them to get in and out, I don't think.
Okay, so
okay.
Thank you for your answers.
No worries. Thank you.
There's a question from Tom. Tom Jenkins. Where did you source your bales and how did they cost? How much did they cost?
I used a local wholesaler, D Hughes, I believe they're called, and I think we paid £3.50 a bale. Although I've got a feeling that's gone up since then.
Okay. Okay. Did you actually shop around just on that question, or were they the first person or first people you came to?
They were pretty much wound up being the first people I came to, mainly for location because they're sort of within an hour of us.
Okay.
As I say, there's not a lot of people growing wheat, so it tends to be smaller wholesalers who are probably mostly buying it from them.
Right.
That.
Boise, you have a question.
Yeah, well, statement really. I mean, it's a cracking build, Mike. It's really good looking. You should be proud of yourself. Yeah, I'm a retired straw bale builder as well, so yeah, you should be really proud of that. You say you use concrete.
Yeah.
Was that your first option, or
The
was it
original
kind
plan,
of?
it kind of was. The original plan was to build out from the hill. And although I'm really taken by the car tire piers that I've sort of found out about through Barbara, the problem was it was going to be about 7 feet up on the downhill side, and I wasn't confident in that as a sort of method for supporting it. And just given the nature of the slope, we went for foundations that we were confident weren't going to move. And then at the last minute, wound up after everything had been approved, wound up changing to digging out a platform rather than building out from the hillside.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I figured we'd kind of gone so far down that road, I didn't want to change direction and get myself extra problems.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Dan has asked, or said initially, it's a great house. Did the bales need to be stored in a barn for a period of time to compress, or was ratcheting enough?
No, ratcheting was ratcheting, and the weight of that ring beam, which is extremely heavy. Yeah, ratcheting did the job.
Okay. Tom Jenkins asks another question. What heating do you have?
We've got a wood fire in the living room, which we use when it gets cold or when we want to watch the fire, and we've got a wood-fired range which also does our hot water, and we use solar thermal heating. Sorry, hot water heating during the summer. In theory, the hot water system does the hot water and the radiators, but to be honest, we haven't turned the radiators on for 2 years, so
Okay.
we find we need it.
That's very good. That says a lot about the insulation then, really, doesn't it? Because
Yeah.
it's one of the concerns. It's one of the concerns that people have. How warm is it in a straw building? And do you mind if I ask how many of you in your home present?
4 of us.
4. Yeah, so that's quite good. And we have another question from Magdalena. I'd like to know as well how we can engage with local farmers to source the correct type of bales, ensuring the supply is truly local. It needs to be certain density compressed. And I also wonder how the values are calculated for building control purposes. Is that a statement or a question?
Sorry.
John Butler, maybe John. Sorry, Mike. You can answer this one if you're able to. It's quite.
This was sourcing the bales. Honestly, I don't really know if I can answer that one. I mean, the area I live in is sheep farming and dairy farming. There's really not anyone growing wheat in any significant quantities. So, I mean, the UK is not a particularly big country, but they're not as local as it would be ideal for us.
Right.
That makes sense.
It does make sense. Boise, you coming back in?
Yeah. Did you think about using anything else like miscanthus or anything like that, rather than just wheat?
Not really. I'm really drawn to the fact that the wheat is effectively a waste product, whereas miscanthus is all the energy that's involved in producing the miscanthus is being produced purely for the bales, as far as I understand it. Whereas with the wheat, it's almost an afterthought, the straw on that. I appreciate it's used a lot, but it's grown for the grain.
Okay,
That makes
thank
sense.
you.
And yeah, and compared to sort of other methods of actual building, I just fell in love with the straw bales the first time I saw one. I went, I like that.
Marjolaine, do you want to ask your question as opposed to me answering it? or asking it. Do you want to unmute yourself if you feel confident enough to do so? I'm going to unmute you. Or can you unmute yourself? There you go. Oh, hang on. Let's try that again. Go on, unmute. I'm not going to do it for you. You do it. Right, you're on.
Hello.
You're on. You're on. We got you. And you've muted yourself again. Don't know what's going on. Let's try. Can you unmute yourself, Marjolaine? Oh, this is becoming a difficult one. Sorry. Let's go. I'm going to ask your question on your behalf, if that's okay
Right.
with you.
Oh,
Yes.
we've got.
Could you explain the difference between concrete foundation and gravel footing?
Don't know if I totally understand the question, but obviously a concrete foundation is what's traditionally done with building. If you were building a brick house, it's basically pouring a lot of concrete into a trench. Gravel foundations are either crushed compressed rock or gravel within a trench. I would have ideally had a series of pads of gravel effectively dug into the ground with piers coming out of those. And if I was going to do it again, that's how I'd do it.
Mhm.
Does
Okay.
that make any sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. Sorry about the tech issues there. We have a question from someone called Baker, and he commends your presentation. So he says, great presentation, Mike, and a great build. You mentioned Barbara's book. He's very new to the game, and can you share the reference? If anybody's got a link to the book, can I put it in the chat, please? Also, a more general straw bale construction question from Mike or anyone. Could you use
That
straw bales to insulate and continue building out a stone structure like stone building or barn?
I can't see why not, as long as you work out how you isolate any moisture transfer from the stone wall to the straw bales. That would be the way you'd have to think about.
John Butler has surfaced. John, did you want to answer that question? And for some reason you're
There we
muted.
go. Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, basically the answer is yes. You can extend any existing building with straw bales as well. As Mike's kind of hinted at, you need to look at the junction between the two buildings carefully, but there's a number of ways you can address that quite straightforwardly. So yeah, I mean, essentially, the short answer is yes. It's been done quite a lot.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Are there any other questions before I take the chair's privilege and ask one myself? I'm sure many of you guys who've come on tonight have questions just flying around in your head, and maybe you're too shy. Come to me, give me your questions. Come on. Okay, I'm going to ask a question, Mike. So this is a general question. It's not necessarily about the technique that you utilized. What made you want to build with straw?
It would be, it was probably the curvy window reveals on Ben Law's house on Grand Designs, basically.
Okay, and is that it?
That's pretty much it. I mean, then I was drawn in by, well, it was obvious, it was very clear to me straight away how it goes together and the processes involved, and that it was something I could relatively straightforwardly achieve. Whereas, you know, bricklayers earn a lot of money for a very good reason, which is that it's actually really hard to do well. So if you're looking to build your own home, even if you're using traditional methods, bricklaying probably isn't a great one to use.
Right.
So the skills are easier to learn, I would say.
Yeah. So you had no construction, excuse me, no construction experience per se.
Done
Right.
a little bit of garden landscaping. I've made the odd raised bed and retaining wall, but no.
So who were you using besides referencing Barbara's work and doing her course? I mean, what for you to transition that knowledge onto your own personal site, you would have had to have either lean on someone who was more suitably equipped as a builder contractor, or did you just dive straight in?
Pretty much dived straight in. I mean, I can't state enough how helpful our engineer was. She was amazing. And she worked out exactly how to balance the loads and give us our big windows and so forth.
Yeah.
And obviously from a technical aspect, my father-in-law had basically already drawn up this house for the purposes of building control. So there were obviously some tweaks and they needed to know the details of the walls, but there wasn't. So there was help in that respect. But in terms of how it went together, a lot of late nights and lying awake thinking about it mostly. And then details. I mean, it came down to I literally sat astride the top of the roof with my phone in hand, watching YouTube videos of how to do different shapes of lead work, for example, when we were doing the covering. And
you said initially, if anyone was trying to take this kind of projects, patience is key, right? So working with or collaborating with your local council, local authority, could you just give us a little bit more detail on that? Obviously not going into the detail, but just a little bit more, because from our understanding, it's dependent on where you are within the country as to how quickly you could complete a project like this. But what was your experience?
I'm sure where you are is a big factor, and I think probably who you're speaking to is a big factor as well. As far as the building control side of it went, this area of the country is actually, Carmarthenshire has actually had several straw bale builds already, so people have already jumped the bridges and proven that it can work. So they're more comfortable. You're not breaking new ground there.
Okay.
I suspect in other parts of the country that might not be the same case. And planning permission, I think you're just dealing with people who've got to answer to sort of committees of councillors who all have their own agendas and whether they do or don't want buildings built and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Just doesn't always make sense, and sometimes it's quite upsetting when you're getting constantly turned down for things.
Yes. So patience is key, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a couple of more questions from the audience. I think Tom has put in another question, and I think it's for Boise, funnily enough. Boise, he says, a question for Boise, as I think you are from Norfolk, like me, where did...
So I've already answered it, mate.
I beg your pardon, sorry. Maybe
It's all right, no worries. I've already answered it.
Pay attention, Cyprian.
Thank you.
And Lucy Tinsdale, what was your cost per meter squared of the whole build, Mike?
Hold on, I think how big the 915. Hold on. Hold on. Sorry, I've got to do some quick math.
I love it. And if there are any more questions from anyone, please put them in the chat. And
For
we
the
will
building itself, just based on the ground floor measurement, it would be about £1,000 a square meter. Obviously, there's 2 floors. For the whole, so that's £500 a square meter, really, I suppose. but the land was an additional 50,000 on top of that.
Okay. Okay. Right. So I do have it here with me. John has just asked me to put into the chat the tech guide. Yes, so I'm going to put this in there for everyone. There's a link which is coming. As well as, and I would always suggest and recommend that anyone and everyone in on this call, if you've not built before a straw building and you're contemplating going down that route, then seek as much information as possible. By all means, approach some of the members on our website. But what I'm going to put into the chat now is the tech guide. So it's the straw building for the UK construction tech guide. John Butler, who's on the call at the moment, he contributed towards that, as did Julia Bennett, who's one of our board members. It's free. It's there for you to download, use it, and make the most of it. Are there any other questions, please, on the floor? Don't be shy. Make the most of Mike as he is here. He's
Different.
working in-
Someone's asked about if the session's going to be recorded, if it's going to be available after.
It is going to be available.
Okay.
It is going to be available.
And then someone else has asked, did you get a self-build mortgage, Mike?
No, we got lucky enough to have enough money out of the sale of our house in Reading to almost entirely fund it.
That was a question
But
from Lucy.
Thank you,
Okay.
Boise. Yeah, financing bio-based material properties is a question that we're often put our way, and it's one which we are presently undertaking through the work of our working groups, working parties. Right, so Rob Marsh has asked, did you have an air test done, and is there any ventilation system?
There's mechanical ventilation as required on the bathrooms and the kitchen. But no, we didn't have the air test done. We had the calculations. Basically, there's a way of working calculations where you can avoid having the air test done at the end. It was just another hoop I didn't want to jump through.
Right.
I don't know how it would do on it. I think it'd be all right.
Okay. And let's see if there's any more. We've got a little bit of time left, but let's see if there are any more questions from anyone, any of the shy people in the background. Once built, Lucy has asked another question. Once built, thank you, Lucy. Would it qualify as a non-traditional construction, and could it be resold to cash buyers?
It's certainly insured as a non-traditional construction, obviously. But as far as resale goes, I honestly don't know.
Yes, that's a question, funnily enough, that somebody was asking me the other day in relation to that. They're selling their property. It's a straw building. We'll come back to that. We'll return to that and put out a solution. It's not the solution, but a solution to people who are considering that, building a straw building and then selling it on, because I think there are some loops which you have to jump through. So, Lucy, by all means, please keep asking the questions, but there's one more from Rob Marsh. Do you have any condensation issues? So this goes back to the ventilation system, Mike.
No, nowhere.
So that's one of the benefits, isn't it, of building with straw or straw bales, because the bales are so dense. We don't have that in that regard.
And the use of lime as well, Cyprian, helps
yes,
with
well,
that.
yes, well, the coating of lime.
Allows it to breathe and
Yes. Would it be, hang on, Lucy, sorry, question is more if it would be considered for a mortgage because it's a straw bale. Do you use triple glazing or double? Right, okay, so I think there are two separate questions in that. Windows, What kind of windows do you have?
Windows are double glazing, PVC frames.
Okay. And going back to Lucy, I'll tell you what, do you want to ask do you want to ask this question yourself? Because I'm confused. Can you unmute yourself if you want to? Putting you on the spot. There you go.
Hi, sorry, I'm just in the middle of cooking dinner and listening.
Ah,
So
right. Sorry, I beg
typing
your
in
pardon.
between. No,
Right.
not at all.
What are you cooking?
Thanks
We're
so
all
much.
coming
Yeah.
round.
Sorry?
What are you
Oh,
cooking?
yeah,
We're all coming round.
I'm cooking chicken and breadcrumbs. It's a traditional Czech recipe.
Okay.
You can have
Thanks.
it. Yeah,
Um,
sorry. So I guess my I was just interested in the glazing when you said there was no condensation. So I was just curious, what level of glazing there was. But yeah, my other questions were really in relation to whether the buildings would be considered for a mortgage, which would be, from a case for a self-building point of view for someone who doesn't have the funding to begin with. Or then in terms of, being able to sell the house if you say needed to move to a different part of the country to be with your parents or something like that. And part of the reason I'm asking is because I'm an architect and I'm really interested in supporting people with self-building. So yeah, that was just, from the kind of funding perspective, having that access to, if you don't have enough funds, whether straw bale buildings in the UK at the moment are considered mortgageable or not. So I just wondered if anyone has experience with that.
I mean, I honestly don't have any idea. Anyone else?
John,
Someone answered.
John,
People
do
have
you
got
want to unmute yourself, John Butler?
for a number of straw buildings.
Yeah, just to say exactly what I've typed really. Yeah, you can get mortgages for straw buildings. People have quite a lot of straw buildings in the UK their construction has been funded through sort of self-build mortgages.
That's
Some
great.
have been put together for kind of commercial open market sale with mortgages. So not self-build mortgages, just normal mortgages.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. That's good
So
news.
there's a few providers. I mean, people like the Ecology Building Society will pretty much always mortgage a straw bale building provided that's being well constructed. And I think kind of more general mortgage companies are kind of becoming more aware of it, and there's increasing evidence, obviously, of the durability of these buildings. So yeah, it's definitely possible. I'm not sure sort of. I think it's probably still not as kind of as broad a range of providers as there is for kind of standard construction, but it's broadening basically. So yeah,
That's good news, because I know quite often it's just a matter of sort of proof and insurance, isn't it? That if they don't have enough sort of precedent to prove that it's okay, they might not get the insurance to actually lend the money, and so it just becomes a bit of a challenging close loop. But yeah, no, that's really useful. Thank you.
The mortgage process itself is kind of tried and tested now with straw, so I think that's pretty good. And the fact that mortgage companies will sort of generally just insure straw buildings now as well probably helps the mortgage companies go, oh, okay.
That's great.
Thank you so much. I've noticed Chris Hawker's on the call. I mean, I don't know if he could add anything.
Yeah, hang on a second, Boise. I just Andy, you had a question, or did you want to come in on this specific point?
It was just on this point.
Just for reference, sorry, Mike. Andy's an engineer, so just when you mentioned that your engineer colleague for your build was very helpful, my first thought was Andy, because I know
it wasn't me. No, it wasn't me.
I know it wasn't you, but I was thinking.
No, my only thought is that I use it as maybe it's a trick, but if you have a non-load bearing straw bale, in other words, you build a timber frame house and then you fill the gaps with straw, then as far as I'm concerned, the definition is a timber frame building and it just has straw insulation. So it might be, if getting a mortgage is more difficult, build a timber frame house, put straw in between. It's the same thing.
So then it's a straw insulated.
Mike's has the roof lowered, but you'd have to have the roof supported so that you could take the straw out if you wanted to and put it replace it or something. So that's personally, that's what I tend to do, because it might provide more mortgage sort of range, but as John says, it works perfectly well. It's been proven so many times in any form. So it's just, it may be one thing if you were really stuck, it might be a solution.
Perfect, thank you. But they can be supporting as well then to a degree. Obviously they need to be connected through, but they can to a degree support, certainly be self-supporting.
Yeah, I mean, it's like any wall, it supports itself. And, and some engineers will say you can't use it for stability in the building, but I think you can.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much, everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Lucy, for that brilliant question, and John for joining the dots too. I'm mindful of the time now. We're fast approaching close of this event. Are there any other questions? Well, then I think all that is left is for me to bring this to a close. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this meeting tonight. It's been absolutely brilliant. Mike, you are a star. I would suggest all of you to have a look out for Mike Penfold and his Facebook profile, because maybe perhaps later or next year, anyway, not this year, there may be some courses forthcoming. But yeah, it's been very, very considerate of you to share your experiences with us. We really do appreciate that. I think everybody on this call will benefit from your words of wisdom, whether they are experienced or not. So Straw Bale UK is going to be on a webinar tomorrow, 12 o'clock. Go to our website, you can see the details from there. If you want to join Straw Bale UK, all of the details are on our website. So that's it. Thank you, everyone. Good night, and we will see you very soon. Take care. Good night. Bye-bye.